I've always tried to live by a simple rule: treat people the way you want to be treated. That's been my moral compass for as long as I can remember. I don't lash out, I own up to my mistakes, and I do my best to handle things with kindness and honesty. But living a good life, really sticking to those values, it's tougher than it sounds. Even with all that effort, life still found a way to knock the wind out of me. I had just gotten back from a 2-day work conference in Texas. I walked into the kitchen and found my wife, Rachel, and our kids laughing about something. But the mood shifted real quick the moment I asked what was so funny. Rachel didn't answer my question. She just told me to sit down, waving a bunch of papers in my face like it was nothing. They were divorce papers. And not just that, there were adoption papers too. She said she wanted her new guy, Jason, to adopt our kids. She wasn't asking me. She was telling me. Calm as ever, she said all she wanted was the house. According to her, signing the papers was the right thing to do, since I supposedly cared about the kids' future. 12 years of marriage, and that's how she dropped the bomb. My son, Ethan, gave me this smug little grin. He's 10. My daughter, Maddie, didn't even look up from her iPod. She's 9. Our youngest, Luke, he's 7, was the only one who said anything. He told me Jason had a big house and that they liked him. Like that somehow made this okay. I just stared at them all, thinking, what the hell is going on? Was she drunk? Hi. But there was no smell of alcohol. She was sober. Stone cold sober. Rachel dropped the papers on the counter, handed me a check for half the money in our joint account, and told the kids to take my bags to the truck. Yep, my bags were already packed before I got home. I looked at her and asked, in a voice lower and colder than I meant it to be, "You really think I'm just leaving?" She told me I was moving out. Said I hadn't been listening. But this house? This house was mine. My parents had let me live here long before Rachel and I ever got married. Her name wasn't on anything. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I made it clear she wasn't taking my family's home. I told her if she wanted to leave, she could. But I was staying put. She rolled her eyes and, realizing she'd lost that battle, told the kids to grab their bags. They were heading to Jason's place instead. That was the first time I asked, "Who the hell is Jason?" Rachel didn't even blink. "He's the guy I've been seeing while you're off working." No shame. No guilt. Just pure contempt. I looked to my kids for something, anything, but Maddie just told her brothers to hurry up, saying Jason could give them a better life. She said, "Mom loves him, and so do we." And the boys nodded like it was all just fine. I walked over to the front door and held it open. They marched right out to Rachel's car. I told her not to touch it, it was in my name, and I paid for it. I told my son to call one of her loser friends to come pick them all up. They all turned around, Rachel and the kids, and flipped me off. That was the moment it all broke inside me. I'd busted my ass for this family. And they threw me away like I was nothing. So I did what any heartbroken man might do. I got drunk. For the first time in my life, I drank myself stupid. I hated Jason. But more than that, I hated them. My own family. But once the alcohol wore off and the morning came, I sobered up. Cleaned myself up. Then I got online and found a lawyer. Set up an appointment for noon the next day. If they loved him so much, they could have him. My lawyer looked over the documents and told me to sign fast, before Rachel changed her mind. So I did. Just like that, with a few scribbles on some paper, I wasn't a husband or a dad anymore. Rachel didn't even ask for child support. In one instant, they were all gone. My entire world, gone like it never mattered. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized. But I didn't stay the same. I threw myself into work. Went back to school. Got my master's and eventually my PhD. Now I'm Dr. Brandon Holt, CPA, PhD. I know accounting's not flashy, but it fit me. Made sense of the mess. I opened my own boutique firm, focusing on high net worth clients who wanted personalized attention. Word spread. By the end of my second year, business was booming. I was finally putting real money away, and for the first time in a long time, life felt steady. That's around when I met Patty, a smart, kind woman who shared my values and interests. She was a little taller than Rachel and had this graceful confidence about her. Everything just clicked between us. By the 4th year of running my firm, we'd outgrown our space. So instead of renting again, I bought a 5-story office building. It felt like a huge milestone. Patty and I loved that place so much, we actually got married on the 4th floor. It was a small ceremony, but full of joy. Maybe I celebrated a little too hard that night, because a few months later, Patty surprised me with news: she was pregnant. I'd hoped for a bit more alone time with her, but honestly, things were going so well, I couldn't complain. The past 6 years had been the best of my life. Then out of nowhere, Rachel popped back into the picture. One afternoon, I was blindsided with legal documents. She was demanding $3,000 a month in child support, and claiming I owed $432,000 in back payments. I hadn't heard from her or the kids in over 7 years. It was ridiculous. I laughed, then handed the papers straight to my lawyer. Turns out, Rachel had hit rock bottom. Jason, the guy she left me for, had skipped town. A week later, she got served with divorce papers. Jason claimed she pressured him into signing the adoption papers and convinced a judge to void them. With no husband and no money, she turned her eyes back to me. Even worse? She got my parents involved. They'd kept in touch with her after the divorce without telling me. Rachel fed them a carefully crafted sob story, and they bought every word. My dad was the first to confront me, saying I should forgive her, take her and the kids back, and be a family again. I reminded him I was married now, with a new wife and child. But he wasn't having it. He actually suggested I leave Patty and go back to Rachel. I lost all respect for him in that moment. I asked him to leave. Then my mom showed up pushing the same nonsense. She told me if I didn't reconcile with Rachel, they'd give her the house, and I could move out. Didn't matter to me. I was closing on a new place the next day, paying cash. When you've got money, things get done quick. The next week, my parents came to the old house and found it empty. Rachel and her kids moved in the very next day. That was 2 years ago. I haven't spoken to Rachel, my parents, or her kids since. Patty and I now have 4 children, and our business is thriving. This year, I was honored as Businessman of the Year in our area. The local paper ran a photo of me with my wife and kids. It was a proud moment. When I gave my speech, I made it clear, none of this would have been possible without Patty. She's my foundation. My strength. Mid-speech, the doors opened, and in walked my parents. With Rachel. She stormed up to the stage and accused me of being a deadbeat dad. She pointed to Patty and blamed her for the collapse of our marriage. The room fell silent. But my lawyer had a hunch something like this might happen. He came prepared. Without a word, he grabbed a remote and activated a projector. A video played on the side wall, filling the room with audio and footage that stunned the crowd. It was Rachel and her lawyer, in a parking lot outside his office, plotting. On camera, she said having the court revoke the adoption would work out better for her than the deal they'd arranged. Then she laid out a twisted plan to drug Patty, film her in a staged affair, and swoop in to comfort me afterward. She even bragged about manipulating my parents, saying she'd threatened to keep them from seeing their grandkids unless they played along. The room was dead silent when the video ended. Rachel's lawyer tried to slip out a side door, but the chief of police was already waiting. A couple of judges in the crowd made sure he didn't get far. I looked over at my parents. Then I turned to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and we walked out together. I kissed Patty in the parking lot as I loaded the kids into the car. That's when I heard my name. My parents were calling out to me. I didn't stop. Didn't turn around. Just got in the car and drove off. I didn't see them again until I was called to testify against Rachel and her attorney. After I gave my testimony, I stepped out of the courtroom. My father was there, waiting. He told me he was sorry, said he and my mother had been fools. That they missed me. That the kids missed me. That I had 4 grandkids they'd never even met. He begged me to forgive them, to make the family whole again. I didn't say anything to my dad. Just looked at him for a second, then turned away. After a few steps, I stopped and said, "I'll think about it." Rachel ended up getting sentenced to 3 months in jail, followed by 4 years of probation. Her lawyer? Disbarred, permanently, for conspiring to defraud both the court and me. Child welfare got involved soon after. They warned us the kids would be placed into foster care unless either my parents or I stepped up to take them in. I asked my parents to do it. My dad said they would, on one condition. "I just want to be part of their lives," he told me. "Is that so terrible? We're old. We're not going to be around forever. Don't you have it in your heart to forgive?" I told him I understood wanting to be in the kids' lives. But Rachel didn't just make a mistake, she orchestrated a campaign of manipulation. She used the kids, turned them against me, lied through her teeth, and he still sided with her. He had said once that some things just can't be forgiven. That the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I reminded him of those words. I reminded him how he turned his back on me when I needed him most. And now, suddenly, he wanted to pretend like none of it ever happened? I told him he was old enough to know better. He made his choice. Now he had to live with it. That was 10 years ago. Rachel never changed. She got married again, and tried pulling the same stunt on her new husband. Didn't work out. He caught her cheating and threw her and her new lover out. As for the kids, my boys, Ethan and Luke, both ended up in prison. Maddie, the only one who showed even a flicker of heart, showed up at our doorstep before everything went south. Patty believed Maddie had been misled by her mother and didn't hesitate for a second. She welcomed her in and insisted we help guide her toward a better, more meaningful life. Before they passed, my parents finally got to meet our kids. On their deathbeds, they left the division of their estate up to me and asked that I make sure everything was split fairly between their 7 grandkids. Now, with all our children grown and out of the house, Patty and I are about to become empty nesters. And honestly, I'm looking forward to having her all to myself again. Some people say I was weak. That I should have fought harder for my kids, or for that marriage. But not everything is worth fighting for. I brought in a solid office manager, Carrie, and hired a rotating crew of independent investigators, people like me, experts in software and systems. We kept them moving from job to job so they wouldn't get too comfortable or familiar with any particular client. Technically, CSFI Incorporated only had a few true employees, Carrie, the investigators, and me. Everyone else worked on a project basis and got a cut of the profits from whatever assignment they handled. Because of how insanely lucrative the software world is, and how high the stakes can be when it comes to fraud, we kept everything extremely confidential. I took that seriously. So seriously, in fact, that no one at CSFI knows who I really am. Not even Carrie. I've always operated in disguise. Even when I hired her, I was in full costume, wig, glasses, prosthetics. Over time, I got pretty good at building new disguises and changing my look. When I take on an investigation personally, I don't get paid through the company like the others. My cut goes into a separate account under an alias. Most cases are handled by the team, but once every few months, I take one on myself, just to keep the skills sharp and honestly, for the thrill. Karen has no idea CSFI Incorporated exists. As far as she knows, when I drive out to Milwaukee for a few days, I'm meeting with game distributors. In reality, all my computer game business is handled online. The Milwaukee trips are for investigations. When I get there, I pull into the company apartment's garage, switch out my personal car for a company Buick, and put on my disguise. Then I pick up the assignment files and hit the road. Sometimes I work locally, sometimes I'm flying to New York or elsewhere. I always return to Milwaukee, ditch the disguise, and head back home to Highland Park like nothing happened. Now, you might be thinking this all sounds like the setup to an affair. Like maybe I'm using these trips to cheat. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I love Karen. I mean that. I love her with everything I've got. I'd never cheat on her or do anything to damage our marriage. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for her. And that's why I'm telling this story. A few months back, I personally took on a case for a company called Maros Software. They suspected one of their developers was leaking proprietary source code to a competitor. Sounded like an interesting challenge, and a good opportunity to get a glimpse into Karen's world, since she worked in the legal side of corporate finance. So I picked up the assignment. Maros was based in Oak Brook, another suburb of Chicago. I figured I'd check out the job and maybe explore some old haunts from my youth while undercover. Who knows, I might even bump into someone I used to know. Mess with them a little. I thought it'd be fun. I had everything I needed from Carrie and booked myself a room at the Drake Hotel in Oak Brook. It was just a quick drive from the Maros office. When I arrived at the company, I didn't wait long before meeting Jeff Maros, the CEO. He was exactly what you'd expect, a tall, dark, good-looking guy with a confident, charming energy. The kind of guy women are naturally drawn to. And to be fair, he was also incredibly welcoming and easy to talk to. I liked him right away. Jeff brought me into his office and gave me the rundown, who he suspected, how the theft might be happening, and what kind of cover we'd use. He introduced me as a special projects manager from one of their clients, supposedly there to troubleshoot bugs in the system. Seemed like a good plan, so we rolled with it. By day 2, I had confirmation. One of the programmers, a guy named Tom, was absolutely selling code. I had all the proof. While I was typing up the report in Jeff's office, his phone rang. It was sitting right there on the desk beside me. Jeff wasn't in the room, and out of habit, I glanced at the caller ID. And my heart stopped. It was Karen's number. At first, I thought maybe her company was a client. Maybe she was calling Jeff for some business thing. I even thought about picking up, imagining how shocked she'd be to hear my voice on the other end. But then I realized answering would risk everything, exposing my company, my alias, the whole operation. So I stayed quiet. A few seconds later, Jeff walked back in, saw the missed call, and casually called her back. What he said next changed everything. "Hey Karen, glad you called. I had a great time last night. Want to meet at Morton's for dinner at 6:30? Perfect. Afterward we'll head to your place for dessert. Bye, beautiful." I froze. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. My stomach turned. My heart slammed in my chest like it was trying to break free. I just sat there, dumbfounded, struggling to breathe. I honestly thought I might have a heart attack right then and there. I made up an excuse, got up, and went to the men's room. I sat in a stall for what felt like forever, just trying to get my heart to stop pounding. My thoughts were racing, and none of it made sense. Karen? The woman I adored? The one I thought loved me the same way? She was seeing Jeff again, and from the way he talked about the night before, it was clear they hadn't just shared dinner. His words painted a picture of intimacy. Casual, comfortable, familiar. I couldn't wrap my head around it. We'd been close, really close. Our relationship wasn't cold or distant. She never seemed unhappy. Never once did she say her needs weren't being met. That's what made this so hard to process. I felt blindsided, like everything I believed about my marriage might have been a lie. It shattered me. My heart was breaking in real time. I started questioning everything. Did she ever really love me? Or was this all just a carefully maintained illusion? Everything I had worked for, my businesses, our home, our future, I'd built for us. For Karen and me. And now I didn't know what any of it meant. Once I managed to calm myself enough to think straight, I made a decision. I needed more than a hunch. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable evidence. Because once I had it, I'd know exactly what to do. I went back to Jeff's office and forced myself to finish out the day. It was brutal, sitting there across from the man who had just admitted to sleeping with my wife. I wanted to explode. But I held it in. Confronting him now would only blow everything up before I was ready. Jeff eventually turned to me with a sheepish grin and said, "Hey, sorry about what I said earlier. That woman's just, wow. I met her a few weeks ago at a client's office, and we hit it off." I wanted to punch him, but I kept my face neutral, nodding like it didn't matter. He went on, completely unaware. "She told me she'll call next time her husband, computer boy, goes out of town. We'll hang out again." I froze. Computer boy. That's what she called me? He kept laughing. "She said she married him 'cause she knew he'd end up rich. Gives her a cushy life, and she still gets to have her fun with guys like me." He didn't know, of course. Didn't realize he was describing my wife. My life. "She claims she loves him," Jeff added, "but she also loves cheating." Go figure. It took everything I had not to react. But in that moment I knew for sure it was Karen. No doubt. She wasn't just cheating with Jeff, she'd probably done it before. Maybe with others. I'd suspected nothing. Still, I needed more than Jeff's word. I told him I had to head out early but would return the next morning. He didn't question it. In the car I called Karen. She answered cheerfully, told me she missed me, and asked how my trip was going. Her voice, so warm, so affectionate, made my skin crawl. I asked about her plans for the evening. She said she was just working late and might grab dinner with some friends. I told her I'd be gone another night or two and would check in later. That's when she told me not to call, said she didn't know when she'd be home. Translation: she didn't want to be interrupted during her next rendezvous with Jeff. The nausea hit me all over again. That night, I knew what I had to do. On my way back home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought 5 mini wireless surveillance cameras and a modem. I was going to catch her red-handed, no more guesswork. Once I got to the house, I used the remote to disable the exterior security cameras. I parked in the garage so she wouldn't see my car. Then I slipped inside and rewound the footage to erase any trace of my return. I set up the cameras across the house: kitchen, living room, family room, master bedroom, and guest bedroom, just in case she tried to get creative. Everything was routed through the modem and connected to a recorder in my basement workshop. I could monitor the entire house remotely, online, from anywhere. Once everything was up and running, I left again. Drove around the block, waited a few minutes, then reactivated the security system with the remote. Unless she checked the timestamps on the footage, which she never did, she'd have no idea I'd been there at all. She never bothered with the cameras anyway. That was always my job. Once everything was in place, all I had to do was wait. Eventually, the hunger kicked in, so I drove to a nearby pizza place to grab a bite and a couple of beers. I didn't want to get buzzed, just take the edge off while staying sharp enough to monitor what was happening back home. Later, I headed back to my hotel, set up my laptop, and got everything connected. Deep down, I still clung to a sliver of hope that this was all some kind of mistake. That maybe I was wrong. But as the night wore on, the weight of everything I'd seen started to crush me. I couldn't hold it in. I broke down crying. Around 8 p.m., I saw Karen's car pull into the garage. At first, she was alone. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe nothing was going to happen after all. But then, the security camera shut off. The driveway feed went dark. I quickly switched to the kitchen camera. Karen walked in wearing a short black dress, one of my favorites. Low-cut. Spaghetti straps. The kind of dress she only wore when she wanted to get my full attention. I used to love seeing her in that outfit. But tonight? It felt like a knife in the gut. She wouldn't wear that to go grab dinner with friends. She wore it to impress someone. And it wasn't me. Tears streamed down my face again. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Karen wasn't who I thought she was. Moments later, Jeff walked in from the garage. Apparently, she left the door open and he parked in my spot to avoid being seen by neighbors. She greeted him with a long hug, and they kissed while his hands roamed her back. She told him they should head to the bedroom. They grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and walked out of frame. I switched to the living room feed and watched them pass through on their way down the hall. Some small part of me hoped she'd take him to the guest room. I know how stupid that sounds, but I couldn't bear the idea of them being in our bed. Of course, it was false hope. The guest room feed was empty. When I switched to our bedroom, they were already sitting on the edge of the bed kissing. Karen poured the wine toasted to a handsome man and great chemistry, and they both drank half their glasses before setting them down. Then Jeff stood up, and Karen unzipped his pants. I wasn't shocked, I was numb. Watching it didn't arouse me, didn't intrigue me. It gutted me. It wasn't the first time. That much was obvious. There was a level of comfort between them that only came with repetition. I had all the confirmation I needed. And just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, I heard her say, "We should do this again tomorrow night." Then she laughed and said maybe she wouldn't let Computer Boy touch her anymore. That's when I knew. Karen didn't love me. Not even a little. I had hoped, foolishly, that she was confused or lost. That maybe if I confronted her, she'd see what she was throwing away and stop. But hearing that? There was no coming back. I turned everything off, crawled into bed at the hotel, and cried until I passed out. When I woke up, my eyes were swollen, my face puffy and pale. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I knew the day ahead was going to be brutal. But at least now I knew what I had to do. As much as I hate admitting it, I wanted revenge. Not just to end the marriage. No, I wanted her to feel what I felt. I knew it wasn't mature or healthy, but I couldn't help it. I needed to hurt her, even just a little, to begin healing. I didn't even hate Jeff. Not like I should have. But I didn't think it was fair for him to break up someone else's marriage and walk away unscathed. If he wanted to play with fire, he was going to get burned. I drove back to his office with a plan. Being Computer Boy had its perks. I knew how to strike without leaving a trace. While he was in a staff meeting, I lifted his keys, had copies made, and accessed his home. He had hard copies of his source code there. I already had access to his system, but now I had everything I needed. I hacked into his personal and office computers. I found his network passwords and security backups. Then I created a custom virus, one designed to wipe every trace of his source code from every drive, every backup, and every customer's copy. Once triggered, it would change all access passwords and systematically delete everything. Permanently. Then I moved on to Karen. Using her login at her company, I transferred $200,000 from my own business account to Jeff's, and then to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands that I had set up in his name. I erased the trail as best I could. Someone with the right tools could eventually piece it together, but it would take a hell of a lot of time and effort. I don't know if they hooked up again that Wednesday night. I didn't care anymore. Thursday morning, I pulled the trigger. The virus went live. By Friday at 9 a.m., I was standing in Jeff's office, handing him a report on the internal code theft investigation. I told him CS5 would invoice him for my services. He smiled and said it had been a pleasure working with me. I just smiled back. If only you knew, I thought as I shook his hand. I drove out to Jeff's house using the copied keys I'd made earlier. Found a stash of archived versions of his software tucked away in his office, just like I expected. I grabbed the files, headed back to my apartment in Milwaukee, and destroyed them, burned every last one. This wasn't about making money. It was about revenge. Pure and simple. I stayed in Milwaukee that Thursday night, knowing the storm was about to hit. Friday morning, I called Carrie and told her the project with Maro's software was complete. She said she'd take care of billing, and that my cut would hit my account soon. Then I drove back home. Karen was there when I arrived, crying. She told me she'd been sent home from work, suspended pending an internal investigation into securities fraud. She said money had been transferred from our business account to Jeff Maros, a guy she claimed to have met a couple of weeks ago. At work. Barely knew him, she said. I played dumb. Acted surprised. asked questions like I had no idea what was going on. At exactly 9 a.m., chaos erupted at Maro's software. Everything, systems, access, backups, went dead. None of the programmers could get into the network. Phones started blowing up from clients who suddenly couldn't use the software. I wasn't there to see it, but I knew. I knew exactly how it all went down. Later, I learned Jeff immediately blamed Tom, the programmer he'd already fired for leaking source code. In fairness, Tom was guilty. But that didn't get Jeff off the hook. And as a fellow programmer, I'll say this: anyone who tampers with source code, steals it, or profits from it unethically deserves whatever comes to them. Eventually, the $200,000 was traced back to Jeff's account. He denied knowing anything about it and pointed the finger at Karen. She denied it too, acted like Jeff had orchestrated everything and dragged her into it. I kept my cool through the whole investigation. That is, until Jeff publicly admitted to having a personal relationship with Karen. I confronted her. She cried. Apologized. Swore it was just one time. Claimed she'd been lonely while I was out of town. I didn't argue. Didn't need to. It didn't matter anymore. I knew it wasn't just once. And I knew we were done. Jeff was found guilty of securities fraud. He was fined $50,000 and sentenced to 6 months in jail, though he only served 3 on good behavior. But his company was gone. His software, everything, destroyed. Last I heard, he was working as a mid-level coder at a competing firm. Ironically, Tom worked there too. Karen lost her job. And with no way to salvage the marriage, I filed for divorce, citing infidelity. I'd always been the computer geek in our relationship, but now that worked in my favor. Thanks to my legal team and the prenup she never bothered to read, her settlement ended up being just 10% of our net worth. She was also fined $50,000 for her role in the securities fraud and sentenced to 3 years probation. No jail time, but not exactly a slap on the wrist either. With only $150,000 to her name, she couldn't afford to stay in Chicago. She moved to Milwaukee, took a job waiting tables at a bar. Maybe she'll do all right. But she'll never live the life we had. And maybe, just maybe, she'll think about me sometimes. And remember how much I loved her. And feel the sting of losing that. I sold the house in Highland Park and moved into a penthouse apartment in Milwaukee. Between the shared funds, CS5's reserves, and the business sale, I walked away with over $7 million. I figured it was finally time to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I also decided Carrie deserved to know the truth, that I was the real owner of CS5 Incorporated. She just smiled and said she'd known all along. Disguises or not, she saw right through it. Gotta love that woman. And I do. Often. And fully. We got married not long after the divorce was finalized. Now we're building a quiet, fulfilling life together. Neither of us works full-time anymore. We don't have to. We're expecting our first child this December.